This is Caleb Westfall, and I am interviewing Ellen Tucker with Gail Germanson as part of the Bayview Historical Society's 40th Anniversary Oral History Project. It is currently about 11 a.m. on August 5th, 2019, and we are conducting the interview at the Beulah Brinton House in Bayview, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Ellen has agreed to participate and contribute to today's recording to the Bayview Historical Society's archival collection so that it may be preserved and available for future use as indicated on the deed of gift form received and signed by Ellen. Ellen, please be assured that we understand that your participation is fully voluntary and that we can take a break, postpone, or terminate the interview at any time of your request. We have a list of questions to help get the discussion started, but you are welcome to decline answering any of these that you don't want to answer and answer others as you see fit. We have some specific topics that we want to cover, but mostly want to hear what you have to say about your experiences in Bayview. We have set aside 1 hour for this interview with the understanding that it may run slightly shorter or longer. We thank you for your time and willingness to share your stories with us today. And with that, we'll get started.
Okay. Well, we have already established some interesting stories, but now we'll just continue and just do this real informally. Just state your name, honey, and where you live, and
I
where you grew up.
am Ellen Tucker. I am the great-great-granddaughter of Beulah Brinton, the great-granddaughter of Emily Brinton Pickard, and the granddaughter of Mabel Estes, the daughter of Daisy Tucker, and I was born close by but lived mainly in the Brinton house until I was 5 years old when my father returned from the war. And then we moved over to Verona Court, between Morgan and 35th. And we lived there until I was 11. Now during that time, I remember many incidences at the house, and as a matter of fact, Gail and I were talking, and up came the polio quarantine, and how the both of us remembered it in the 40s. I guess it was middle 40s it had to be, 1940s.
And I think early 50s too. Early 50s.
And me being born in 1940, I was a little older than you. You were born in 43, right? And so we were talking about the funny situations that we had, because you don't take it too seriously when you're that age, and you want to escape from being kept in quarantined.
Yes.
Yeah, and you were saying about what would you do?
Oh, how I try to escape from the backyard. And I had to be maybe 4, so that would have been maybe in 48, 49. And we had a picket fence, and I tried to escape to the neighbors, and I caught my little pudgy leg in the picket fence. And we had the restaurant at the time, and a delivery man came, and my mother was frantic, and she said, "I'll get the saw." And I thought they were going to saw off my little leg, and I was hysterical, but they just were going to saw the picket fence.
Well, I sat on the curb on the corner of Pryor and Superior, and I would yell to anybody who came along, and especially my friend who was across the street, and we'd try and play together. But it was so hard because we couldn't step off the curb, or mainly my grandma was keeping an eagle eye on me all the time. And so, but I was so used to going on my grandpa Estes, Ira Estes, my grandpa. He would pick me up and put me on his shoulders, and we would, this had to happen 10 times a day because that's what I always wanted to do. We'd walk across the street and go to the fountain.
Oh, the iron well.
Yes, and I grew up on the wonderful water from the fountain, which not a lot of other
wonderful
people.
water. It tastes terrible.
Oh, I love it because I grew up on that water. That's what we used. That's the water we used in the
Wow.
house and everything.
Really?
Oh, yeah, we'd go fill up
So
the
you go there
jugs.
every day or a
Oh,
couple
many
times
times a day.
So you'd bring the water back
Oh,
here then, and that's what you
sure,
used?
in jugs
Oh my
and
goodness.
things. And we'd you know, and it had all the good minerals in it. So
Yeah.
that it was more help in immunity.
When the cryptosporidium thing happened here, what was it, in the 70s, I
Yeah.
think? That's where we got our water, the iron well.
Sure.
And,
But I have cups in my car because I'll go past and want to fill a cup up and have cold water that way. I don't care for it as much warm, but I love it as a cold water. Everybody else hates the taste, and I love it.
now
but-
Estes there's this, the Estes house, was that your
Oh,
family?
there were
or grand-
many. Oh, yeah,
Oh.
we had a bunch of Estises. The thing is, the Estises homesteaded part of South Shore Park, right about the corner up here,
Right.
the northeast corner. And so Elijah Estes and Zabiah Wentworth, his wife, that he met in Chicago, came up here and developed the land there, and they had a lot of kids. And there were a lot of Estises suddenly. So there were numbers of Estes houses, and we did have closer Estes family and not so close, but I remember at least 3 or 4 different Estes families that we would see all the time that were all around here.
It's a beautiful house, it's still there.
Well,
and-
that, and then there was another one, not too far from that. I can't remember, I'd have to see who lived where, because it's very difficult for me as a child like that to remember exactly.
Now,
But-
Caleb, you notice the names she's mentioning, they're
All
all
streets,
streets
yeah.
here, Estes and
Whitworth,
Wentworth and, yeah.
no Britain, but there's an Ellen
Yeah,
Street down here, and
Oh,
that's,
yeah, sure.
that's a Beulah Britton daughter, Ellen, and she died young. She probably about 21 or something. And Uncle Worry was always so upset because he forced her to marry a man she didn't love, and thought he was responsible for her dying.
Is Uncle Ward named after Ward Brock?
No, he was after his father, Beulah Britton's husband. Warren Britton Sr.
Okay.
Uncle Worry, we called him Worry because he was the same name as his father.
Was that always Superior Street?
That I can remember. I don't
Interesting.
know what it was,
Yeah.
because then Delaware down there used to be a river, and
Mhm.
you know, there's so much different geography around here in Bayview.
Was Deer Creek still there? No.
No,
No.
we didn't have a creek there when I was alive. But the Uncle Worry and Emily and Ellen, I think, were the surviving children of Beulah Britton and her husband, because she had 6 kids. 3 died when they were babies of whatever, probably consumption.
Hmm.
That was when the days when, and she, Uncle Worry was very successful. A great Uncle Worry, and he worked in Chicago as assistant controller of International Harvester. And the best thing about that was huge in those days, you know, International Harvester after the war, just made all the farm machinery, all the, you know, everything. He, during the Depression, had foregone the salary and requested stock in the company instead. So he was wealthy by the time he passed away, and nobody knew it until then. And he would sit on the front porch all the time, and I'd sit with him, and he was just so jolly all the time. He was never married, but we would play together and everything. He was just very energetic. You can see in this video that I have that he was always jumping around and laughing and teasing people, and he would tease, you know, a lot.
And he was pretty smart too to buy the
Brilliant,
stock. Yes.
brilliant man though. But not only that, the family didn't like some of here I'm telling you the secrets of the family, which is great because it's really all positive. He took a trip around the world, and I have his trip log at home, and it lists everywhere he went. He took all of these steamers from all. I remember when we took him down to the train station in Milwaukee to go to New York to get on the ship, and he went all of these strange places all over the world, mostly in the Middle East. He came back with a whole set of books on meditation, and I have all of these books. My family wanted to burn them because they were Methodist.
What time era? What time was this? When did he do this?
Oh gosh, if I had that trip thing with me, the log.
Must have been before the war.
No.
No.
I remember going with him, with my mom to drop him off and say goodbye for his world trip, and he was gone for a long time. So, but he brought back a lot of ideas, values, books, and things from around the world. So he was incredibly interesting, and I still have them. And they were, my mom was going to get rid of them, and but I'm a Siddha Yoga, which is not religious, it's meditation, but I learned the true way to, and I think he had an effect on me to always look for similar things in other people's religions, as well as Beulah Brinton, who was always so adamant about education and educating yourself as to other people's cultures and things, which we all know. This is the general knowledge of this historical society, hence the community center, where she tried to bring people together and keep them from forming gangs or even disputes between people who didn't understand each other's cultures.
Your family seems extraordinarily broad-minded, if that's the word I want.
For a
Very
while.
open-minded, very open to new ideas.
Well, until they weren't. There was a lot of strong old-time Methodist influence, hellfire and damnation. I
Bummer.
remember every Sunday me sitting right here in the chair I still have, which I will give to you, have carved dog's head arms on it, and it was horsehair. And I would sit on that chair all Sunday with all my crinolines and my fancy little dress when people would come to visit on Sundays and after church or whatever. And the backs of my legs were red raw with, rubbing against this horsehair. It was just so uncomfortable. But now I had it reupholstered. It was totally falling apart. My mom was going to throw it away. I mean, oh my gosh.
Throw it away.
And I have the original library table that was started in the library here. And I have that. I'm going to give to you guys as soon as the redecorating is over. You can have that and put that in here somehow. And there's some painted lamps. Now, I have one left, and it's a good 18-inch circumference, and it's very Art Deco. That was made by a company that was my grandpa Estes worked for. The name has escaped me for a second. Here, I will get it. Mo Bridges Company, and it was all beautiful glass with hand-painted scenery on the inside, so that when you turn the light on, see a beautiful, and that's ready to come over here too.
Where was that in this house?
The lamp was changed occasionally, but mostly I remember it in that corner. The library table, of course, had books all over it, and there were no built-ins then. It was just
That's what I was going to
table.
ask you. What was the library like back then? Was it
Just
more,
books hanging out all over the place.
more than what we have now? That just those shelves?
There was no shelves there.
No shelves.
There were no built-ins at the time. It was the library table. And that's what
Okay.
people used, I don't think they ever had built-ins in those days, Beulah Brinton. But anyway, those were added much later, way after me.
Okay.
And, but I have this beautiful table. This is
So the
absolutely
books were on the table.
on the table.
Sir,
There was a
that's
shelf
how-
underneath, and more books, and more books probably here and there. And it got too big, so they
and no
took a
shelves.
space.
Oh,
Made Llewellyn. Was that the first one?
well, yes.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I don't have all of the information, of where it ended up. But then there was a library started.
Because that
But
got
I
started
know-
quite early.
Uncle Worry was a reader, and great Uncle Worry, Beulah's son, and so he had books everywhere. And of course, he was alive when I was around. And we always went. I remember going with Graham to Groppy's, and we would go shopping there, and we had those little red tokens during the war that were for meat, and these were limited to a certain amount, per family or whatever, because meat was so scarce during the war, and so we would go and try and find as much meat as we could with.
So it was
with
like
what we
rationing,
had.
right?
It was rationing, yeah.
See, I don't remember that at all.
Well, you would be too young for
I
that.
guess.
because-
Well, my dad was, overseas, and at that point we lived with my aunt and my grandma, and I was only about 3 or 4. I don't remember that. 3
Yeah.
probably.
And I only remember it because my grandma had a whole bunch of them afterwards when the rationing wasn't necessary anymore. And I used to play with them. She'd put them in my little marble box or something like that. And as well as marbles, I'd play with these little these tokens, and you'd flip them. So I definitely remember that. And Groppy's was a great store. And then right beyond there was, we would walk to church, and the Trinity Methodist at the time. And it was much smaller then. But to this day, I'm a member. When we moved to Whitefish Bay when I was 11, I started with the United Methodist Church up there on Silver Spring. And for many years I was confirmed there, but I had been baptized here in the Trinity Methodist.
You're saying it was fire and brimstone. That's interesting because I always think of Methodists as being very liberal now. Today, no?
Yeah, today, yeah.
But not then.
And especially this Bayview Church is the forerunner for the progressive
Right. Right.
Methodists, and we are all inclusive. Anybody and everybody is welcome, and the United Methodists of the world, actually, because they include a lot of Methodist churches from, for instance, Africa, Australia, because there were so many missionaries that went and developed that, and they don't have the permissiveness in their culture, so they don't accept. They are not inclusive of LGBT people, so they voted against having any
that's a
inclusiveness.
reason.
Yes, and it was tilted that direction because of mostly of Africa and their cultural beliefs. So to them it was a no and even punishable by death.
But this particular, our Methodist church is
Everybody.
liberal. Yeah.
And there are quite a few of LGBT people there. A lot from Milwaukee will come
Interesting.
there. And we are extremely open, extremely welcoming. We have now, and honoring Beulah Brinton, every Sunday we have what's called bread and jam, which really is a dinner, a Sunday dinner. Every Sunday we get up to 70 people over there on a Sunday, homeless, people that also visit the Beulah Britton Community Center know from there that they can go to the Methodist Church for their Sunday dinners, and they're given packages of food and
That's
supplies and things when they leave. And some of these people are just so wonderful to talk to because they have the same memories that I do of Bayview very often, and I'll sit and talk to some people that have had hard times and now are homeless or.
So you're involved in that?
Oh, I'm very involved. I've been in the choir for so many years, and I'm not so involved in that. I go and help out, but not that often. I should go more often, as we all say, should do more of that. But we have a new pastor, and he's extremely welcoming, and which is good because we were concerned about who we might get. The Methodists always move their pastors around between 5 and 10 years at one church. They expect to be put into another church. And so our wonderful Pastor Kelly was transferred over to New Berlin, and which is a church having troubles, apparently losing, parishioners, the elderly people mostly, and they're going and not replenishing, which is very sad. But that's happening to a lot of churches and a lot of denominations, Catholics as well.
Well, I grew up going to IC right down the street. That was my church, and that was the focus of our life was IC.
Sure. We built everything around
Our churches.
and we couldn't ride a car. We couldn't on Sundays. We couldn't use a car.
Right.
We couldn't cook. We couldn't.
Oh wow! Really?
Everything had to be done before then, and we couldn't
No
play
kidding.
games. Well,
Almost sounds like the Jewish
you'd
Sabbath.
go to hell if you had a deck of cards in the
Whoa,
house.
babes.
That was what the Methodists were based on, was drinking and
Gambling and sex, of course.
That's because that was the scourge
Yeah.
during those days that Methodists came to being, and the Methodists mainly started the Methodist denomination because these were farmers, and they couldn't leave their livestock and travel into the city to go to church on Sunday, and they couldn't afford what they had to pay as a tithing because there was no way that the church could exist unless people had to pay a certain amount of what they made, like 10% tithing. And so it began by the Methodist minister, and I had one over here at Trinity Methodist when I was a little baby, and he had a horse and buggy, and that was the way the Methodists started. They would travel around to the farms, and they would go to the 4 corners of 4 farms, and then the families would just connect right there. And they had a lot of kids because they needed help with the farms, so they tended to have as many kids as they could.
So what you're saying is there's an itinerant preacher would go around.
Right.
And they didn't have like a church then,
No.
they would just
No.
probably use a
Until-
barn.
No, 4 corners out there, in the snow, in the rain, in the, whatever, and preach hellfire and damnation. Like, you're going to go to hell if you gamble, if you drink, if you do this,
Whoa.
if you do that. And it was difficult but these were the times when men would go out and get drunk and gamble all their money away, and then the kids and wife would starve, and it was really very, very bad in those days. But then, with 2 other churches, Trinity Methodist was born, and I always thought of it as the 3 churches made the Trinity, But they're telling me, no, it's just the religious
Trinity,
connotation is the Trinity, yeah. So, but I always thought of it as because there were 3 different churches involved. And that's all that they could afford. The 3 got together and built this little church.
You know, you were talking about on Sunday when you couldn't do anything.
Mhm.
I remember even when I grew up, everything closed on Sunday. Or they closed at noon. The A&P, you couldn't go shopping, you couldn't go, everything shut down on Sunday.
And how about your restaurant?
Well, we were open.
Yeah.
We were open at 4 o'clock, and we'd go to mass. We'd go to noon mass. My dad would take a little nap and then open up at 4 o'clock. And
Yeah.
we were open. But everything else, I don't know how we worked around that. Well, the Catholics weren't so strict on not doing anything on Sunday that I can remember.
You talk about the Methodists now being liberal or progressive. They were the most demanding. Well, not more than Catholic, because there were other things that the Catholic, would demand of you.
Yeah, no meat on Friday.
Oh,
stuff
things
like
like the saints, and we couldn't relate to the Pope and the saints and
that.
and
Right.
stuff like that. But we related to the land and the farmers and what was the most important to deal with at the time.
Could you date a non-Methodist? Because Catholics could not date a non-Catholic.
Yeah.
And I married 2 of them.
Well, anyhow, it was in high school that I remember that that Catholic kids would tell me that I was going to hell
Oh, sure.
because I wasn't Catholic
That's right.
and I wouldn't be able to pray and reach God unless it was
Yeah.
through a priest. That people can't,
Right.
Anyway, so I always in my church and my family says, well, I'm never marrying a Catholic because anyway,
Isn't it?
that's the way they feel. So,
yeah. My childhood sweetheart was Lutheran, and I was going to St. Mary's, and he brought me over to the house to meet his parents, and I thought his mother was going to die. There I am in my little St. Mary's uniform, obviously Catholic, and she told Dean if he married me, they would disown me, and such nonsense.
Yeah.
And he died quite young, and then I married another Lutheran. And
Well, I always seem to get involved with Jewish men, Orthodox Jewish men. So that was the story with my parents, because they didn't. That Beulah Brenton wouldn't have.
But you were allowed
Well,
as a Methodist to date non-Methodist, right? Or no?
I always dated non-Methodists.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I didn't. I never heard that I couldn't. No,
Oh,
there was never
oh.
any restriction, except for the Catholics didn't want to get involved.
Well, we couldn't, honey, under pain of death. You could not marry or whatnot.
I know.
Such
I
nonsense.
know.
Such utter nonsense.
I had a friend that I lived with in New York that I went to Northwestern with, and we were friends and roommates and so on. And she was so held back by all of that. She once had, I think she ate meat on a Friday, and
Oh, God.
she got so sick. I mean, she was really totally sick. And then she fell in love with this parent. I don't know why she did, but she fell in love with this Catholic guy. But maybe, no, he was Catholic, I guess. He was married and had 2 kids. And she was in love with him. He was going to get divorced, and they worked for years on an annulment and broke up because they couldn't get it annulled. And he didn't want to anyway. And his wife was just desperate not to have him get an annulment for their marriage because that would make their kids, illegal. It was just
Illegitimate, probably.
illegitimate. Just so painful. All of this.
So essentially so stupid.
Well, look at the Methodists have their stupidities, and the hellfire and damnation thing was very, very difficult, and it scared the hell out of me all the time. The church was a frightening place for me because they'd yell and scream, and they even had that old-fashioned thing where if you fell asleep, they'd hit you with a stick.
No.
We did. Because they watch you and see if you fell asleep in the sermon. And
We had Father Ryan when I was growing up, and he said the fastest mass probably in the country. Everybody would go to the 12 o'clock mass because Father Ryan would pull that sucker out in 45 minutes, maybe even less. He was so fast. He whooped through that Latin, and because he had to get home to be able to watch the Packers. But but Father Ryan was the best, and he just fastest mass. You couldn't fall asleep because it was so fast. Bang, 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 bang.
Well, I left when I was 18 here. Actually, I went to Northwestern between my junior and senior year at Whitefish Bay High School. And I had taken all the AP classes in like math and science and so on. So I was able to go to a summer program at Northwestern. It was called the National High School Institute, and I was in the radio and TV area, and I just came alive. I just couldn't believe that there was a world where I could actually do things and get somewhere and move forward, and I just got so much energy, and I did very well there. I had never thought I had a very high IQ. First of all, I was female, and they wouldn't let me take physics in high school because it would make me look masculine, and it would and besides I'd be the only girl in the class. So I did this National High School Institute, and then they asked me to come back. Now my grades weren't great in high school. I don't think I'd ever be able to get in, but when I went there and I really performed, and we had classes all day, we had, it was very strenuous, and actually it was even harder than my freshman year when I went to Northwestern. They said, here's an application, just sign it and send it in, and and you can come. So that's what I did, and I went there for 4 years. But I took, I didn't have to take the basic math class because I'd had the AP already. But I took physics, I took astronomy, and I did a lot of biology and chemistry. And because mostly they didn't believe in a theater degree, that it would get me anywhere or do anything for me. And of course, this is the way I lived all my life. I've used my degree all my life. But you had to do it at night. You had to be in plays in the evening and go to rehearsals and stuff like that. But you had to have more of an education then.
And then you kind of blossomed, right?
Oh, I did.
You blossomed.
I really did. I was, and I found out that my IQ is very, very high. So it gave me more and more confidence,
They would never tell us our IQs because I went to St. Mary's and they just say, "Oh well, you're college material," but that was guarded like a secret. They would never tell you your exact IQ.
Yeah, I know that. When later on, when I was in my 30s and I had, he was, I say boyfriend, he's a doctor at UCLA. He was a head cancer pathologist at UCLA Medical Center, and then later became head of the Children's Hospital in Long Beach, in California. But he said, I have a suspicion, he said, that you're a lot smarter than you think you are. And so he's brought home from UCLA their standard IQ test, and I mean he had Asperger's, which I don't know if you know what that means.
Yes.
Okay, so he had said that we would be getting married in 2 years because he would be through with his divorce in his mind by that time, but he had never asked me, So it was just one of those brilliant, men who was just, I don't know.
Yes, I know what Asperger's.
Okay, and so he had a timer, and he had a pencil and a paper.
And he gave you an IQ test?
Yeah, but I said, okay, what is this? I said, sets. I don't understand what sets are because I don't know the new math. He gave me a whole thing in the new math.
Oh,
and
God,
then,
I hated no math.
But I I love math. I do 10 Sudokus a day, and so anyhow, this is not anything to do with this, except that I was always told that I didn't have a brain because I was a woman, and that I was not allowed to. My dad was an inventor and an engineer, and luckily, pervasively, he, in whatever I was doing, he treated me just as he would a son. And so he would say, "What'd you do today?" And I'd say, "Oh, I learned the slide rule." Remember those? And he'd say, "Okay, down in the basement." So I'd go down the basement. Okay, this is the fraction. This is how these work. This is how you do your math. This is how he was always ahead of the schoolwork. And he was always ahead of anything that I wanted to do. I had to know it 100%. Physics, I wanted to take physics. He said, "Okay, come on downstairs. This is how a refrigerator works." He said, "I'm installing one at the back bar downstairs, and this is in Whitefish Bay." And he said, "So this is how it, line it up. How is this how it?" So this is where I got my physics, was at home.
Cool.
Plus, I was champion ping pong player there in school because he taught me, and he would not let up.
Wow, funny.
And I got my driver's license at 16, and he said, I said, "Pass my driver's test." He said, "Now I can drive." He said, "No, you can't. Not until you pass my test."
Oh, wow.
So I
Didn't
had to,
Beulah Britton
you
have
know,
ping pong tables here?
I don't think
Or
so.
tennis?
It was
No, she
tennis.
was tennis.
And she had a clay tennis court out
Yes,
there,
that
which
was
was
it.
wonderful. Later, my dad built one down on the corner of down on Oklahoma and Verona Court, a corner there, and he built a whole clay
Wow.
court. But he would teach me. He taught me to sail, and he built a boat in the basement, and I had to hold it and help him put things together. And it was a cub sailboat. It was like 14 foot,
Wow.
12, 14, and of course we had to put it together in the end outside in the backyard. But then we took it out to Lake Cottage. We were on Lake Sindissippi in Eustis Ward, where his family built a log cabin on the island
Goodness.
out there. My grandma Clara, my father's mother, was head cook at South Division High School, and her husband was principal. My grandfather, who I never knew, he died before I was born. Anyhow, they built a big, and
This was
so
your father's side.
my father's side, which I rarely heard about. It was always
Yeah,
my mom's
right.
side. So and so I ended up with the all-women sailing crew on Marina del Rey. We were in the Wednesday night races and Marina del Rey, and we sailed 4 or 5 of us. It took a 36-foot Islander, and we would and I was at the helm because my father taught me how to feel a boat, how to listen to the boat, how to know if it was well made, that you could trust the boat to sail itself.
Well, your dad
And-
sounds very cool.
He was incredibly cool, but very, very strict. And so it was always a kind of a, iffy situation. But
You ever
he-
sailed on the South Shore?
Not really, because I wasn't here. I used to sail in the ocean. We'd sail to Catalina and back, and it's much easier. The ocean is much, much easier to sail. Of course, unless there's a squall that comes up, and I've run into that before. It's a miracle we didn't miss Catalina a couple of times.
Well, they say
So-
the Great Lakes are more dangerous because.
All those boats, ships down there,
Right.
and but my family sailed, and that's why I'm getting to that. Uncle Wari was a big sailor. He owned a big boat, and he was part of the original South Shore Yacht Club.
That's what I was
And
wondering.
so was my grandpa.
There is
Estes.
an involvement.
Very big involvement. My dad was always involved with sailing, and because of that, I extrapolated a little bit, and I would go sailplaning, without an engine. And I don't know how I did that, but you'd get towed up 5,000 feet.
Oh, honey.
And what was scary was the part where you get towed up, and it's just by a water skiing rope, that's tied onto the plane with the engine and the front, the ring in the front here. And of course, it's this big. It's right like this. But I had an instructor in the back and I never got my solo license. It takes forever to do that, but I was able to do it. And
How often did you do that?
as often as I could afford it.
Good Lord.
Pear Blossom was in North California desert, and I forget the name of the one in the southern one. You'd get towed up and get at that height, and it was a lot of bouncing around because of the towing. And so then I'll never forget the time he first said, okay, there's a red knob in there, just grab it, it's a knob, you pull it, and it says release, pull this. I said, put your hand on my shoulder, because I'm going to faint if you don't. And the plane just settled, and it was like this. Absolutely nothing, but you could hear the wind.
Yes.
Going
you
by.
would probably hear
And
me
it was
screaming.
just like a sailboat. It was just like a sailboat. And I wished that my dad could have done that, because he would take me out in bad weather up in Lake Mississippi in Eustis Ford, and my mom would get upset, really upset, because I'd come back with my hands were bleeding and everything, because I was in charge of the little jib, and he would have the mainsail and what you call, I don't know what he called, a jenny on the side. Not a spinnaker, he didn't have a spinnaker, but a jenny. And we'd get, this wind was blowing like crazy, and we'd get in this little boat, and there's no place to sit because it was built for speed. You couldn't get comfortable in that boat at all, and because he built it totally for speed, and we beat every other boat on the island, the catamarans, everybody. And so he'd be back there with the tiller and the mainsail, and he'd get ready to go, and he said, "Okay, Ellen, drop the centerboard," and I had to pull the little key out, and it dropped down, and you could start to hear that. I still hear it in my mind, and all of us in this house would sail, and you could hear the centerboard humming, and it would start humming and humming because it was vibrating in the water, because it was pushed so fast, And so it was everything I could do to hold on to that jib. And he wouldn't let me wind it around a winch. There were no winches. It was just little, hooks and things like that. And I couldn't really wind it because he was constantly correcting direction, constantly. And coming about was this huge major thing where we were just like that and that. And my mom would stand there watching. Anyhow, that was my dad. And
That's
he had lots
interesting.
of patents too on inventions that he made, like, and he learned a lot of that from this family, because
Well, that's what I was going to say, that, usually the emphasis is on your maternal side, the Beale Britain side. You don't hear too much about your dad's side.
well,
Now we do.
my dad's side was very, very strong, but he also learned a lot from this family, because he went to college on the GI plan, and he became an engineer.
Was he in Milwaukee at this
Yeah,
time?
he
right?
lived over, you know where that ambulance place is on KK? Wilson?
Mhm.
Yeah, right behind there, one of those little bungalows. That's where
Was-
they grew up.
That's what I was going to ask. He was an old-time Bay Viewer then?
Yeah. Oh, that's where they met in the Trinity Methodist choir. My mom and he met in the choir, and he played the violin, and would be in the young people's orchestra. And my mom sang and played the piano, and so they were. You know, but she wrote for the Journal, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. She was a feature writer for them. And she taught at Marquette University. She taught English literature and journalism.
When did, well, probably before Marquette, because I went to Marquette, but she wouldn't have been there.
Oh, after, yeah. No, probably, well,
60s.
yeah, no,
No.
after, yeah. But she was teaching at university school first. Then she got her master's in English literature, and then went to Marquette and taught journalism. Now, interestingly enough, my dad couldn't write a sentence, and my mom couldn't add to it too. So they were a perfect match.
Where did your dad's family come from? Were they
Well-
second generation, first generation? Bay Viewers?
My grandma, his mom, was first generation from Berlin.
Berlin,
And
that's
she
right,
had
it was German.
she had quite a heavy German accent. It was very difficult during the war because
Mm-hmm.
people weren't supposed to speak German,
Mhm.
and I wish that I could have learned it, but we were told not to speak it.
My grandmother was German, and well, they came over in World War I, and my mom had been learning German in school in Oshkosh, and World War I hit, and they dropped all the German studies, so she
Yeah,
never learned
yeah.
to write in German. They still spoke German, but
Yeah.
she was learning all the fancy, what do you call the German writing? There's a term for it.
Oh,
The old fancy
calligraphy.
German, well, kind
No?
of, yeah.
Maybe.
Because we have some books here in the library written in that old German, and nobody can read it. You know, the old fancy German. But anyway,
I
she
never
was.
had a German history, and neither did you, really,
No.
because of our age.
But yeah, they were learning that, and then he had to stop because of the war.
Mhm.
But that was World War One. World War Two, I don't remember. Well, I was just a baby, but I don't know. My mom never talked about being discriminated against. Of course, she was married at the time, didn't have a German name.
Well, my mom was embarrassed with my grandmother's German accent. So we didn't have my grandma Clara with us that often. And I would get so angry at her that, that she would allow that to happen. And a little later, when I understood what the family was all about, and I would start channeling Beulah Brinton when she said, this is different, this was war, we were at war with, Germany, and I don't want people to know that we have any German heritage.
See, I didn't think it was that rampant here in Milwaukee, which has such a big German population. I didn't think there was that much anti-German.
Maybe not in
bias.
Bayview, but in Whitefish Bay,
Oh.
things were rampant.
Oh.
Like the first black people that, and it was a brave. He and his parents wanted to live there. He bought him a house. Hank Aaron, and he first black people in Whitefish Bay, which they usually call White Folks Bay. And
Well, the Whitefish Bay is heavily Jewish too, right?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the high school was a huge population. My best friend at the time, Barbara Sherman, I'd go over to her temple on Saturdays sometimes and go because I was curious and I wanted to know all about her, about the Jewish religion, and then I would, but she never came to church with me. I think she did once. Anyway, we were very close, and there didn't seem to be any. It was between
See,
the
now here
Catholics.
on my dad was Ukrainian, and they spelled their last name was Radomski with a Y, and he told me about all the Jewish prejudice back like in the 30s, where he couldn't get a job. You had to be careful because he wouldn't hire Jewish people. I was so shocked as a little girl that Why wouldn't they hire Jewish people? He had to change, he was gonna anglicize his name to Ramsey. And my aunt told, you change your name, that you don't change your family name. So he dropped the Y to an I. But I've told you the story before, I think. My parents had a bar on Mitchell Street, World War II, before he entered the war, before he went to war.
Uh-huh.
And the German Bund came in, the swastika, the whole German Nazi Milwaukee style, the Bund. My mom was behind the bar, and they said, we heard your husband is Jewish. And my little mom, who was like 5'2", she just tore into them. She said, we're not Jewish, we're Catholic. You get out of my bar, and I'm not going to wake my husband up. He was up since 3 in the morning, and you just get out, and then she chased those guys out of there. But there was a heavy Jewish prejudice on the south side of Milwaukee, which is interesting. While you're growing up in Whitefish Bay.
The northeast side,
yeah.
yeah. No, there was very heavy. And that's why I was always very, actually there were a lot of things about the Orthodox Jewish religion that I preferred to the Methodists. So at Northwestern especially, I went to the rabbi over there. Rabbi Skirbel was his name. And now I get red in the face and so embarrassed when I think about what I did. I said, you know, it's very hard for me to swallow the whole thing about Jesus and this. And I said, maybe I should be Jewish instead. So I said, I don't believe in hell, and I don't believe in the devil, and I don't.
There you go.
And I can believe in the Genesis, but frankly, I said, I think of Jesus as a teacher, and I do not see the spiritual quality that I have to believe in to be Methodist.
And how old were you when you said this?
19, 20.
It took me a little longer.
Well, I was so close to the church. I was president of the MYF, the Methodist Youth Foundation. There, I did all kinds of things, volunteer work, and so on, but to be confirmed there. And he was Pastor Baxton. Oh, I'm getting old. Anyway, he was the best reverend I've ever met, and he, frankly, Rabbi Skirbal said to me, you know what? 3 times I knew this. You have to go to a rabbi 3 times and request to be Jewish before they will even consider it. Anyway, so he said, I think you should go home and talk to your pastor, Reverend Buxton. Okay. So I did, and I sat down with him, and he said, how many people in this congregation do you think are so Methodist that they believe everything that the Bible says about Jesus and all of it? He said, we don't turn you away. Said, if you don't believe in the devil, you know, that's fine. He said, you know, but I would encourage you to learn more about this and educate yourself. So I did take the course in Judaism, and then later on at the Silver Spring Church, when I came back here, when I was 47, I took a wonderful course in Methodist beginnings and so on from a professor from Marquette that was just excellent, and I still have all of that. I have the whole big packet of that, and decided that after all, I probably, everything considered in the big picture, family included, that I probably was a Methodist more than anything else. So.
Are you familiar with the Messianic Jews, the Jews for Jesus? I have a cousin who actually married a Jewish man who's a Messianic Jew, and they believe in Jesus. It's kind of an interesting.
That seems
interesting thing.
An oxymoron to me.
It's interesting. He's,
but belief in Jesus doesn't mean that they thought
well,
he was holy, but more of a great teacher. And
I actually can't wrap my mind around it, but they're very Jewish. became a Messianic. She was Catholic and now she's a Messianic Jew.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of the Jewish traditions, what they believe in Jesus. So I don't understand that, but you never heard of that.
Well, I was engaged to an Orthodox Jew in New York. And it was for years when we did USO tours together. So we were very, very close and knew each other so well. And we were just perfect fit. And yet my mom said to me, "Oh, Ellen, why can't you find someone your own kind?" As if we were different
Your own
animals,
kind,
you
right.
know? And like dogs breeding cats or something, you know? That was the intimation. So it started to disappear. But I would go to visit his parents on Long Island. They were very poor Jewish people, and we'd walk to temple, and he would put on his yarmulke, and the two men would walk ahead, and his mom and I would walk behind. And I was just totally enamored by the difference of it, and yet the similarities. Everything about the services and everything that wasn't in Yiddish or Hebrew or whatever, I understood and I'd heard already, you know, because it came from the First Testament and a lot of that. And so I wanted to be more like Beulah Brinton and concentrate on the similarities rather than the differences. And in the end, I did walk away, which is too bad because I think that was the best fit I ever, you know, could have made in a best friend, best companion, best, you know. And
Now, who did you
too bad
actually end up marrying?
I didn't.
You never did?
My mom asked me, "Why have you not married?" She said, "Are you lesbian?" I said, no. And she said, "Well, why was it?" And I said, "Well, because in that little house," that's my son, but I'm not going to answer. Sorry. She was laying on the dying couch in the dining room for quite a while.
What was it called?
The dying couch.
The dying couch?
Yeah.
As opposed to a fainting couch.
Well, that's totally different.
But it was-
Fainting was
No, but the
theatrical.
laid along
But
kind of.
no, it was just a plain couch that had a good cushion on the bottom, and because she couldn't make it up the
Oh,
stairs,
wow, babes.
she would just lay there, and she couldn't even get up, and she'd
A
have to be
dying
fed.
couch.
Well, that's what the family.
No, but I never
would
heard
say.
that expression.
She died there. Uncle Rory died there. Bill Brinton had died. You know.
Died here in
Yeah.
this building, in this
Yeah,
house.
yeah.
That explains
Well,
all the mysterious stuff that happens here.
Hmm.
You ever experienced no haunting things?
Oh, I've channeled her many times, and I've had miracles, and my mom did too. When the car broke down, it started when she asked Beulah to start it. So, no, there's absolute, and we usually kept that all kind of.
No, but I felt that here.
I have.
Yeah.
I have definitely used the connection, although it's not anywhere near as strong like what my mom had because she knew her. Beulah Brinton died when she was 11, and Uncle Rory died when I was 11. But he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, Uncle Rory, and smart cookie. And
You said he lived in the house when you were little, right?
Mhm.
Is he lived here at that point, or did he?
no,
Yes.
his sister Emily.
Okay.
And there were 4 generations of us here at the same time.
At the same time.
So,
okay.
great grandma Emily and great uncle Rory
It would be
were
great.
the
It
two-
would be.
the two children of Beulah Brinton
Sure.
that still lived.
Sure.
So there were 4 bedrooms upstairs?
Yeah, 4 bedrooms. Mom and I were in the little one up here. It was bigger because they moved, the panel of the room. It's that weird half window here and a half window there. That's why it was farther back. So that was 3 bedrooms is what it was. And the back one up there was a sewing room. It was so small you couldn't do anything.
Where the bathroom is now?
Yeah, Yeah, that's where the sewing room was.
Okay.
And we had a foot pedal sewing machine. She taught me everything.
And so your grandparents lived here at the same time?
Oh yeah.
So Mabel and I were
Great grandparent,
great grandpa.
grandmother, and her brother,
Her brother.
Lori, and then my grandparents Mabel and Ira
Okay.
Estes,
Sure.
and they have a fun story because they were 18 and they were so much in love, and it was and they they decided that Beulah Brinton wouldn't allow them to get married, so my grandpa put a ladder up there, and Grandma Mabel, and they ran away and got married.
Whoa, people
And-
actually did that. Huh?
And then everyone was so scared that oh yeah, a lot of people did. And then they got so scared that Beulah Brinton was going to kill them. And then when they finally told her, she said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She said, "Well, if you're married, you have to be together here." You know. So that was when they were in high school, Bayview High School. And so they moved in the back bedroom. Uncle Worry's bedroom was here. Grandma Emily was on the dying couch. And Mom and I were
Oh, that-
over
oh,
in this
okay.
bedroom.
So she actually stayed down here on the dying couch.
Pretty much. She couldn't make the stairs.
And what
Was
year-
there a bathroom up there then?
We had, no, there wasn't a bathroom. There was a potty. What do you call it? A bowl.
Latrine?
A latrine that you'd go in.
Because you still were getting all your water from
Mhm.
down the road.
Oh, whoa.
No, there was an actual bathroom here.
Oh, okay.
But not upstairs. There in that little
Gotcha.
spot where you walk down a step.
Mhm.
That's where we had also a tub for me to have baths in when I was a kid, and also to go potty there. And they had a portable, just a ceramic type white porcelain. What do you call
wow.
those things?
Yeah.
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 There's a term.
And but then all those stories about the ragman coming. Do you
I
remember
remember
the
the
Iceman? The Iceman
Yeah.
too, where he'd come with the big tongs and he'd bring a big block of ice and put it.
Wow. And the knife
Yeah.
sharpener.
No, I don't.
We had
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, but I don't remember him so much. But this we could put, but it's already recorded. I think we have all of that stuff, especially in the video and everything.
That'll be cool. That video.
Yeah, when it's full video. Did you give some things on there? Kathy was great in talking about things.